In this video, we'll be going over the semester review for geometry, second semester. This first page is simply a reference sheet that you will have access to in your test booklet once you get the actual test. So the first part of the reference sheet on the left, things that we have used this semester mainly are slope, midpoint, distance formula. Okay, we haven't really talked about quadratics, so you can ignore that part. We haven't done exponentials or probability. And then the entire bottom part you have done. This should look familiar. We just finished volume and surface area, so feel free to use those formulas. Those will be given to you. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and start with the first example here. It says, use the diagram below to find measure of angle LMN. And so LMN happens to be this angle right here. And in this picture, we have a few things going on. We have this ray that looks like it's bisecting my angle. And if it's bisecting my angle, that means that these two are equal to each other. So I can go ahead and set the values 7x minus 28 equal to 3x plus 22 and begin solving for x. Again, I can do this because that is an angle bisector that I highlighted in blue. So I'll be subtracting 3x from both sides so I can start solving for x. When I do this, I get 4x minus 28 is still there, equals 22. My next step will be to add 28 to both sides so I can continue to isolate the x variable. That gives me 4x equals 50. And the last step here is going to be to divide by 4. So x comes out to be 12.5. Now, this doesn't mean that we are done, and thankfully they didn't try to trick me by putting this as one of the options. So think back on what you are supposed to do with this value. This value represents the x value here. So if I were to take this x value and substitute it in for either of these values, let's go with the 7x. 7 times 12.5 minus 28. You should be able to enter this into your calculator exactly as you see it. And when you do this, so take a moment here, maybe pause the video so that you can enter this. Make sure you get 59.5. This represents this value, 59.5 is right here. But remember, we are looking for LMN, the entire angle. So because we said that the blue ray bisected this angle, that means both of these sides are going to be 59.5. So I can multiply 59.5 times 2 because I'm going to double it to get that next angle. That's going to give me 119, and we're talking about degrees, and that is option A. Okay. Number 2. Which of the following diagrams shows the altitude of DEF? So altitude, the important concept here is that the altitude should show a 90-degree angle. Okay, so we're talking about a 90-degree angle there. So I can automatically cross out option A. That one's not showing any 90-degree angles, and option D. And thinking a little bit more about what altitude means, altitude would reference the height of a shape. In option C here, this is not how tall this triangle is. However, option B over here is showing how tall that triangle is. So that's why the answer is B. The altitude has to create a 90-degree angle and also show the height of a shape. Moving on to question number 3, we have which angle is the smallest in the diagram below? So thinking about a few chapters ago, we talked about how corresponding sides correspond to angles. In this case, I have highlighted the smallest side in this triangle. The smallest side is 3.8, which means this side is going to be across the smallest angle. So smaller sides are always across smaller angles, bigger sides across bigger angles. So which angle is the smallest? This is going to be the smallest. Now I have to figure out how to label it. So angles are either going to be labeled with 1 letter or 3 letters. In this case, if this is the letter I'm talking about, I have to make sure I use those 3 letters in that specific order. Starting at I, going to K, ending at J. So I, K, J comes out to be option B in this case. Problem number 4, I have find the value of x. So my first step here is going to be to identify what kind of shape I have. Do I have a triangle? Do I have a square? Just generally what's going on here. I have a 4-sided figure. That's my first step. And we have talked about an equation that I can use to figure out how many degrees are in any polygon, no matter if it has 4 sides, 10 sides, 100 sides, and that doesn't matter, okay? So that formula that we have talked about is n minus 2 times 180, where n is the number of sides. In this case, my shape has 4 sides, so I'm going to substitute in a 4 for the n value, and then I can go ahead and put that in the calculator. So again, as we go through these problems, it's important that you practice putting them in the calculator to make sure that you get the right answer. In this case, you should get 360. So this means that if I were to add up all 4 angles, regardless of what the shape looks like, as long as it has 4 sides, all of them need to add up to 360. So I'm going to go ahead and write out an equation for that. Starting off at the top angle is 3x plus 25. And then I have another angle, 5x plus 18. And another angle, 6x, and 12x minus 8. All of those together should add up to 360. That's what all quadrilaterals add up to. From here, it's just combining like terms, right? So I'm going to take all of my x values, and I'm going to add them up. So I have 3x and 5x and you can put this in the calculator as well. So we have 8x plus 6 gives me 14 plus 12 gives me 26 x's. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my numbers. So 25 and 18, and then the minus 8, make sure you are taking away the negative, make sure you take that into account, and that should give you a positive 35. And again, this is going to equal 360 degrees, so I'm going to continue to solve for x. I'll subtract 35 from both sides. We get 26x equals 325, and my last step here is to divide both sides by 26 so that I isolate the variable, and x comes out to 12.5 in this case. And this problem is asking me to find just the value of x, so that's why the answer is simply D. However, if these angles were labeled, we could also ask you for a specific angle. So if you were to find this angle at the bottom, for example, the 6x, you would simply substitute and get an exact answer for that angle. But in this case, we are just solving for x, so we are done with this problem. Going on to question number 5. In this rectangle, Jn is x plus 3, so I'm going to go ahead and label that first. J to n is x plus 3. J to L is 3x plus 1. So from J all the way over to L is 3x plus 1. Which of the following lengths below is correct? So this is giving us values for the actual segments without x, so it gives us an idea that we probably want to find x first. So 3x plus 1 represents the entire segment. And thinking about rectangles, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. The word bisect means they cut each other in half. So if this part is x plus 3, this part could also be represented by x plus 3. So I'm going to write x plus 3 and another x plus 3, because that's how I would create the entire line segment. Combining like terms, I have x and x on this side, so that gives me 2 x's. 3 and 3 gives me 6. On the left side, I have 3x plus 1. And our goal here is to first solve for x so I can figure out how much the line segment is going to be. So I'm going to subtract the 2x. I have 1x plus 1 on the left, and that equals 6. Then I'll be subtracting the 1. X comes out to be 5. So I have my x value, but that's not going to be necessarily how much the segment is. So we want to know which of the following is correct. That means we probably need to go back and substitute into these values. So NL is this segment right here. If I were to substitute in 5 for x, I get 5 plus 3, which is 8. So this is not a true statement. If I go to JN, that's the one that's next. If I substitute in a 5 right here, again, I get 5 plus 3 is 8. That does not equal 5. So that's not true. Keep going. NM. Now, NM is over here. We don't have any information on that, but I know the diagonals bisect each other. They're also congruent to each other. So if I were to substitute in 5 again into either of these, that means this is 8, this is 8, this is 8, this is 8. So this is actually a correct answer because NM does come out to be 8 because the diagonals are congruent to each other and they bisect each other, and each little piece comes out to be 8. Number 6. JKLM is a rhombus if the measure of angle JML, so starting off by labeling JML, is 70 degrees, and JKM, J to K to M, just this piece, is 5x plus 16. Find the value of x. So what we know in a rhombus is that the opposite angles are going to be congruent to each other. So this angle and this angle will both be 70. However, the part that I'm looking for, it's not going to be 70. It's actually being cut in half by this diagonal. So I'm going to take the 70 and I'm going to split it in half. 70 divided by 2 gives me 35. So that means that this half is 35 and this half is 35. So when I'm trying to solve for x, I'm going to set the 5x plus 16 equal to 35 and solve for x. So subtract the 16 over to the right. I get 5x, comes out to be 19, and then divide both sides by 5. Please use your calculator for this to make sure that you get the correct answer. It's going to be a decimal, that's okay. And we get x equals 3.8 for our answer. Okay. Number 7. ABC is dilated with a scale factor of 4 centered at the origin. So dilations, we talked about, this is when our pictures get bigger or smaller. So our pictures should either be getting big or small, and we can graph these to kind of help us out. It really just means that you are multiplying the x and y values from the original image by whatever your dilation scale factor is, in this case 4. So what are the coordinates of the new image? Well, this is my original here. This is my original A, B, and C. I like to start off by writing down their original coordinate points. So A is at 2, 1. B is at 4, 1. And C comes out to be at 4, negative 3. Now, because these are being dilated by a factor of 4, that means they're getting bigger, okay? Because if it's bigger than 1, your picture is getting bigger. If it's smaller than 1, like a fraction or a decimal smaller than 1, then the picture would be getting smaller. So what this means is you're going to multiply every x and y value by 4. So 2 times 4 becomes 8. 1 times 4 becomes 4. 4 times 4 becomes 16. 1 times 4 is 4. And then 4 times 4 again is 16. negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. So these would be your new coordinate points after the dilation of a factor of 4. Therefore, the answer comes out to be A. And if you wanted to, you could graph this. It's going to be off the graph a little bit, but the triangle would obviously be bigger. Question number 8, we have what is the value of x? We have two triangles here that are similar because they're showing me that they're similar with the corresponding angles here. We have three angles that are congruent to each other. Therefore, I can go ahead and set up a proportion. Looking at this triangle here, triangle 1, and this will be triangle 2, I have 9 and x to work with. So I'm going to put 9 over x. The reason why I'm doing them in different colors, I want to show you that 9 corresponds to being across the angle I labeled in pink, and the x is across the angle I labeled in blue. So when I'm setting up my proportions here, I want to make sure that when I set it up equal to the other values, these are also corresponding. So in this case, in triangle number 2, I'm going to look across my pink angle and notice that's 6. So I have to put 6 in the numerator because it's going to correspond with the 9. And then for the denominator, the one in blue, it's going to be a 12. So this turns into a cross multiplication problem so that I can solve for x. 9 times 12 is going to give me 108. And x times 6 gives me 6x. So to solve for x, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 6. And I end up with x equals 18. And my answer there is A. Going on to number 9. I have two other triangles that are congruent to each other. I'm going to focus here on the 4x minus 8 and the 5. So I'm going to set up another proportion very similar to the last problem, 4x minus 8 over 5. And we're going to set it equal to. Now, think of these triangles as being rotated. This time, the 4x minus 8 corresponds with the x plus 9. So x plus 9, and then the 5 corresponds with the 4. So again, it is a cross multiplication problem. Make sure you're multiplying the 4 by everything in the numerator. So you're multiplying 4 times 4x, which is 16x, and then negative 8 times 4, which is negative 32. And you're going to do the same thing with the other one. So 5 times x is 5x, and then 5 times 9 is 45. And then I'm going to start solving for x by subtracting 5x on both sides. I end up with 11x minus 32 equals 45 over here. And then I'll add 32 over. So 11x equals 77. And then I'll divide both sides by 11. So x comes out to be a 7. Now, paying attention to what I'm actually looking for, I'm looking for the length of AB. So I'm going to go back and substitute for my AB value. So I'm replacing the x with the 7 and then subtracting the 8. 4 times 7 is 28. Minus 8 gives me 20. And that's why my answer for this one comes out to be D. Number 10, in the figure, what is the distance of all travels when thrown from second base to home plate? So second base is over here. Home plate, we're going to look for essentially the hypotenuse if we are looking for as one triangle here. So if it helps you to visually see what's going on, I'm going to take out that triangle and draw it so that we're more familiar with the picture. So this is 90 feet. This is 90 feet. Okay? Now, we have to make a few assumptions here. We know that these two are congruent to each other. And what that tells me about a triangle is that whatever the two angles across from them have to be congruent, right? Because the opposite sides are also congruent. I also know that this box means 90 degrees. So if this is 90 degrees, I have 90 left over because the triangle adds up to 180 to give to my other two angles. Therefore, if we split 90 evenly in half, this is a 45-45 triangle. So the ratios that we talked about with 45-45-90 triangles is 1 to 1 to square root of 2. Now, some of you may be able to just look at this problem and come up with the answer, but if you're not there yet, that's okay. Remember, we are looking for the hypotenuse value, and in this case, I'm going to label that x because I don't know that value. The ones correspond to the 90 feet, the legs, so I'm going to put 90 there. And then this is where you just select two fractions to do cross multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and set these up. 1 over 90 equals square root of 2 over x. Go ahead and cross multiply. 1 times x is x. 90 times the square root of 2 is 90 square root of 2. And that is the value for my hypotenuse. So the answer there is C. Again, you may be able to look at a problem like this and come up with the answer without having to do cross multiplication, but that is how you would do it based on the ratios that we showed you in class. Number 11, what is the cosine in this triangle? So cosine goes back to our acronym of SOHCAHTOA, and we know that the first letters represent sine, cosine, and tangent. Now this one's specifically asking me for cosine, so I'm not going to be using the other ones. But if you're standing at angle X in this case, let's label the parts of our triangle. I know that this is going to be my opposite. This is my adjacent, and my hypotenuse is always across the 90-degree angle. Ka for cosine says I have to put the adjacent on top. So adjacent in this case would be 40. And the hypotenuse would be my denominator, so that's 41. So the cosine is 40 over 41. Therefore, my answer is A. Number 12, we still have to use SOHCAHTOA here. It doesn't specifically tell me which one to use. I have to figure that part out. So it says, what is the measure of angle A? So I'm looking for this angle measurement. So remember, when we are just given the sides of a triangle, not the angle measurement, we have to use the inverse functions. Okay, the inverse functions are the ones that look like this. They have kind of like a -1 exponent. And I just have to figure out which one I need to use. We need to think back on our acronym SOHCAHTOA and see which parts of the triangle we have in this case. If you're standing at angle A, this would be opposite to you. This is adjacent to you. This is the hypotenuse. Now, we don't have anything for opposite, so I'm not going to use anything with the letter O in it. I can't use SO, I can't use TOA. That leaves me with cosine. I have to use Ka because I do in fact have an adjacent and a hypotenuse. Okay, so I know I'm going to be using cosine. I know it has to be the inverse because we use the inverse to find the missing angle measurements. So I'm going to do inverse cosine. The adjacent comes first, so 7. The 10 comes in the denominator. And when you put that in the calculator, please practice that. Remember, you're going to do the second button first and then the cosine button. And then you should see the parentheses there. Do 7 division 10 or the ABC button, however you feel more comfortable doing that. You should end up with 46 degrees. So then the answer for that one is C. Okay, so make sure you are practicing entering those in the calculator. Going on to number 13, find the value of x and y in the diagram below. Select all that apply. So I have a few things going on. First of all, this is a circle, and all circles add up to 360 degrees. So you can do this a few different ways. You can add these all up, right, and set them equal to 360. Now I'm looking for specific values of x and y. So I'm going to start off by figuring out what my semicircle is. This is half the circle. Half the circle adds up to 180. And if I already have, so I know this is going to be 126 plus x. So how do I figure out x? Well, I already have 126 of that. So x comes out to be 54. So x comes out to be 54, and I can cancel out the other x values. This is 54, and so this is also 54 because these are vertical angles. So I'm using vertical angle property here to transfer that information. And now I can focus on my second semicircle. Okay, so again, I know that all of these together are going to equal 180 degrees. So 90 and y and 54 now, because I know what x is, will equal 180 degrees. So combine like terms and then subtract it over. You're solving for y. I'm going to let you do that in the calculator. Make sure that when you subtract it over, you end up with k. Y should equal 36. And another way I can go back and check, if I were to add in the calculator 54 plus 36 plus 90, your answer should be 180 because we're talking about a semicircle. Number 14, what is the length of the minor arc AB? So this is the length of an arc, so you should be using the arc length formula, which is n over 360 times 2 pi r. So it's essentially taking the circumference, but not finding the circumference of the whole circle, just part of it. Now we need to figure out what the central angle here is first, okay? Because the n represents a central angle. Now this 20 does not represent a central angle, it's the inscribed angle. So hopefully you remember that to find the central angle, you multiply this by 2, you double it essentially, and then we get 40. So my end value is 40 degrees, 2 pi, and then the radius is given to me as part of the problem, that's 45. Before I enter this in the calculator, it's important to note that they left all of the answers in terms of pi. So when I'm putting this in the calculator, I actually don't want to include pi because then it's going to give me a decimal answer and I'll have to convert it back anyway. So what I want you to enter in the calculator instead is fraction 40 divided by 360 and then times just 2 times 45. Leave the pi out of it, and then whatever number you get from that in the calculator, you're going to add the pi symbol at the end. Okay, so go ahead and enter all of this into your calculator. Pause the video for practice. You should end up with 10. Okay, if you're having calculator issues on that, let us know. And that's why the answer is B. Let's say that you did end up putting all of it in the calculator, including the pi, and your answer for that would just be a decimal. So that would just be, let me make sure here, 31.4159 and so on. So that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you would have to go back and change all of your multiple choice options to a decimal. So, and then you would see that when you enter 10 pi into the calculator, this is the closest one. That's why the answer is B. Going on to the last page of this review, we have AB is tangent to the circle at point A. So this is a tangent line. It means it touches the circle at exactly 1 point. The circle has a radius of 9. So this represents the radius. Now, I have one more radius in this picture, and that radius is right here. This part is also 9, just from here to here. The 14 that is given to us just represents the length after the circle, okay? What is the length of AB? So essentially, I'm looking for x over here. Now, there was a property when we were talking about tangents and circles that said I could prove that a line was tangent to the circle if it fit the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now I have to figure out which one is which, okay? When I add these up, because this is 9 and 14 together, this is going to equal 23. Now this is going to represent the hypotenuse of my triangle because this should be perpendicular. The tangent line should be perpendicular to the radius in that case. So I know that my hypotenuse is always across that 90-degree angle. So I'll be replacing the c value with a 23. The a and the b value don't really matter. I'm just going to say that a is 9. And I'm looking for b, or x. I labeled it as x, so that's the way we're going to write it. When we're solving for x squared, we're going to subtract the 9 squared over first. Now, it is very important that you enter that in the calculator using the squared. This does not mean that you take 23, subtract 9, and then square that answer. It means that you are entering 23 squared minus 9 squared. When you do that, you should get 529. So please pause the video and make sure you can get that answer on your own. And so the 529 is going to be, just for 23 squared. And then we're going to subtract the 9 squared, which is 81. So really, we have x squared equals 448. If you enter it all at once, you should end up with 448. The 23 squared alone gives me 529. That's what that number comes in. Okay, so now that we have both of those values, all we have is x squared, but I want to know what x is first because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for AB. I labeled that as an x, so I have to take the square root. So second x squared, doing those bends in the calculator, is how that's going to give you the answer, and x comes out to be 21.2, which is answer choice C. Okay. Number 16. What is the area of a circular pool that has a circumference of 11 pi feet? So my final answer needs to be area, and I know the area of a circle is pi r squared. The circumference of this same circle is 100 pi. Circumference is 2 pi r. So I would need the radius to find the area, but I don't have the radius. I do have the circumference though. The circumference is 2 pi r, and I need to solve for that radius. So I'm going to solve for the radius by dividing both sides by 2 pi. So I'm going to cancel those. I have r here. And then I have 100 divided by 2, which gives me 50. That's my radius. Go ahead and practice putting that in the calculator, though. 100 pi divided by 2 pi. Remember, I recommended you use parentheses on that to make sure that you can get just 50. You shouldn't be getting any crazy decimals or anything like that. Now, the radius is 50. Please note, again, your final answers are left in terms of pi, so I want to enter everything except the pi in my calculator. So you should just be entering the 50 squared onto your calculator for the area. 50 squared gives me 2,500, and then I leave the pi alone. If you forget and you put the pi into the calculator, you're going to get a decimal, and remember, that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you have to go back and check which of the answers would be correct from there. Okay? All right. Last two questions here. Number 17. The diameter of a circular pizza is 18 inches. So we have a pizza, and the diameter is the line going through the center all the way through. That whole thing is 18. 2/3 of the pizza is eaten by your friends. So pretending this pizza was split up into just 3 slices. I had all of that is gone. Okay, so now I'm looking for how much is left. I just have 1 out of the 3 slices left because we're looking for the approximate area of the pan that is covered. Covered means there's still pizza in existence there. So if my friends ate 2/3, that means I only have 1/3 of my pizza left. And we're looking for the area, and I know area of a circle is pi r squared. So that's the formula I am using. Now, I still need to figure out what the radius is. Thinking back on what the problem said originally was that the diameter was 18 inches. The diameter is the whole segment across the circle. The radius is half of that. So I'm going to replace the radius with a 9 because 9 is half of 18, and I don't want the whole 18 in there. I just want half of that. So when you put this into the calculator, you are going to get approximately, it's rounding for you, 85. So make sure that you can get that in the calculator. It looks like the decimal answer comes out to be 84.82 when you put that in the calculator. So again, we're rounding up. That's the closest answer that we have here. And last question, what is the volume of this figure? First, you have to identify what do I have here? What kind of three-dimensional figure do I have? Do I have a pyramid? Do I have a cone? Do I have a prism? Like, what is it? And hopefully you recognize that this is a prism because there are two bases. A prism has two bases, and the base is whatever you have two of. So if you are a visual person, you would want to turn this onto one of the bases, maybe the green one, and you would see that this is how tall it would be. This would be the height of the prism. Okay, so hopefully you're writing this down on the one piece of paper that you can use, but the volume of a prism is big B times h. The capital B stands for the area of the base. So this may change based on the prism that you're looking at. The base could be a rectangle. It could be a pentagon. In this case, the base is a triangle. So thinking about how you find the area of a triangle, you should be doing 1/2 times the base of the triangle times the height. In this triangle, my base of the triangle and my height of the triangle are perpendicular to each other. So I'm doing 4.5 and 3.1 as my height. Okay, and then you are going to, once you have that number, that's going to be your big B. So let me actually figure out what that is. So if I put that in the calculator, I get 6.975. So this represents, again, the area of the base. But I still have to multiply this whole thing by the height. H represents the height of the prism. So if you were to turn this prism and lay it on the base, the triangle, it would be 6.7 feet tall. This represents the height, and they're being multiplied together. So now go ahead and multiply those two, and your answer comes out to 46.7325. And remember, this is multiple choice, so we're going to pick the answer that's closest to it. In this case, that's option B. And that is the end of the review packet. So again, you are going to be given this formula sheet on your final, but in addition, you get to choose a one sheet of paper. You can write anything you want on it. So please make sure you see your teacher on what you should probably add on there. Probably add formula of area of a triangle, rectangle, circle, how to find the perimeter, anything you want that might help you when you get nervous on your test. Thanks for watching.